Hello everybody, and thank you for clicking on the video. Today I have a question, and it's a question for Africans, whether north, south, east, or west. I have a question for you, and it's a very simple question. Do Africans migrate? Do East Africans migrate to West Africa? Do West Africans migrate to East Africa? Do North Africans migrate to South Africa? Do South Africans migrate to North Africa? And do they do a switcheroo whenever they feel like it or whenever conditions require them to move? Do Africans migrate? Now, I'm asking this question as an African descendant American who has not been on the continent for 400 or 500 years. And I don't know what the customs are. I know what I've been told, and I know what I believe, and I know what Africans have told me. But there are people who have decided that Black Americans are supposed to be in a box. And that box is a box that they built for us. And if we try to get out of that box, they're going to try to beat us back down and tell us who we are and that we belong in that box and we better not try to get out of it. So I'm going to the source, and that's Africans. Do you migrate? Because every time I post a video about Egypt, connecting African people to Egypt, I get these smart alecky responses, usually not from Africans, but from Europeans and other non-Black people trying to put me in my place. You are a West African, and that's where you came from, and you came from the slave system. Like, I don't know that. There is a concerted effort for a certain group of people, non-Black people, to make African Americans in particular feel that slavery was our beginning and it is our end. And we reject that. We know that slavery for us was a moment in time. We did our time, and now it's time for us to move on to the next step in our human development and in our earthly progress. One of the things that will help us to make this next step is to know as much as we can about African societies, how they move, and how they live. And so I'm questioning, do East Africans migrate? Now, I know the answer to this question because I know what West Africans have said about their ancient ancestral homeland. Many of them will say that their ancient ancestors migrated from East Africa. But somehow, if you are a Black American, people think that you have to just say you're West African. Look at the DNA test. Well, I haven't done a DNA test, and I don't intend to, because it's not going to change my life. And what we have seen over the years is that colonizers and enslavers put a higher value on some African countries and cultures than they do others. These are the people who think that the Egyptians, or want to believe that the Egyptians are white and that they're separate from the rest of Africa. I am saying they are not. They were the ancient Egyptians. Nobody's trying to claim those people that are over there now. We're saying that the ancient Egyptians were Black and that the Egyptian civilization began down in the southern part where the Nile River begins, down near Uganda and Tanzania and bordering on Kenya. That's where it began, and it moved upwards to what they call Lower Egypt. I don't even understand that Upper Egypt, Lower Egypt nonsense. I really don't, but I'm sure it makes good sense. But I want to know, do Africans migrate? Because people are really starting to really piss me off trying to tell me who I am. I used to swallow everything that was told to Black people in America about who we were. And I did that until I started doing research for myself, reading for myself, and listening to Africans from the Sudan, from Kenya, from Ghana, from Nigeria. They give a different story than what we get here in America about what we've been told about who we are. And so that's how come I have started exploring for myself and finding out what I can for myself and forming my own opinion. When I do that, if I make a video about it, I get a lot of pushback from non-Black people, non-African people. Years ago, I was talking to a young man from South Sudan, and he was talking about the Nuer and the Dinkas. They are the tribes of Sudan, South Sudan. And he said when before the colonizers, the Europeans came, they pretty much got along and worked together just like the Tutsis and the Hutus. But somebody comes in and decides that they're going to divide them. So I think he said that they put chicken feet on the foreheads of one of the groups, and he put something else on the foreheads of, or some other way that they labeled the other group, the newer, because he was Dinka. So here goes the instigator whispering in the ear of each tribe. They're against you. Everything they have, they took from you. You ought to have all of that they have over there. So it's just not fair. So here's some guns. So you go and fight them and take it back. Dividing Africans so that they could come in and conquer and take over their resources. And so it's always a trying to divide and conquer. Now we are different, but my understanding from talking to Africans and from studying African civilizations, every culture had its own look, its own style, its own way of eating, its own way of behaving. Some of them were different skin tones, had different facial features, had different hair types, even different heights. But everybody was proud of who they were. They didn't start being embarrassed or ashamed of what they looked like until other people came in among them. And that is what they keep trying to perpetuate. So I'm really getting sick and tired of people coming on my channel trying to tell me who I am. As if a black American, first of all, the slave trade reached all the way into the Congo. And if those people in the Congo, you're going to tell me that people from Rwanda, who's just next door, or people from Uganda, those people didn't get mixed up in the slave trade? Everybody got mixed up in the slave trade. And one group of Africans is not better than another group of Africans. An ancient Egyptian is not better than an ancient Igbo or an ancient Wolof. This has been indoctrinated into us by people who wanted to colonize us and divide us and conquer and take over the resources of Africa. Indigenous people of Africa are indigenous people of Africa wherever they are. And I am proud to identify with one and all of them as an African descended person. And the reason Black Americans go so hard for Egypt is because we know what it's like to be erased. We know what it's like to have your culture taken away from you and told that your culture doesn't mean anything. And then other people come back and try to take from it what they can. Egypt is in Africa, and Egypt deserves to be fought for and argued over just like any other country in Africa, because there are black people in Egypt that are being erased. Furthermore, geneticists, the ones who actually study the science of genetics, have studied the DNA clusters of Black Americans, and they say that our DNA clusters match those of West Africans, but he says that we have ancient DNA that matches with DNA with other African tribes that denotes the migration patterns of African people going from east to west and north and whichever direction they go. So our DNA does not just match West Africans. And an African person actually came into one of my comment sections and said something very similar to that. So I know that Africans know, well, many of them know how the migration patterns are and how Africans move around. But you got somebody in the United States who's never left a trailer park trying to tell me who I am and where I belong. I have always been suspicious of these genetics tests. I believe that they were designed for Black Americans because they want Black Americans to shut up talking about Hebrew Israelites and Egypt. And they want to say you are just from West Africa, and that's where you came from, that's where you belong, and that is all you need to know. So that's how come I don't trust these DNA tests. The geneticists that I would trust and the tests that they give that I would trust would be the ones that have a wide range of DNA material from all over Africa, all of the black people of Africa. The transatlantic slave trade did not just happen in West Africa. It happened in Central and South Africa, but you never hear about any black American having any kind of DNA except from West Africa. And the main countries are Nigeria, Ghana, Benin, sometimes Togo, sometimes the Gambia, and then sometimes there might be a small percent Mali or Senegal or somewhere like that. But the primary countries that they give us, Nigeria, Ghana, Benin, and Togo. Samuel L. Jackson traced his DNA back to Gabon. And I'm sure I'm not saying it right. But we come from all over Africa. West Africa had great empires, and West Africa has always had great riches. Then that's how come it infuriates me when somebody tries to say, you're just from West Africa. First of all, trying to make it seem like it's something wrong with West Africa, or trying to diminish West Africa in relation to Egypt or some other part of Africa. So it offends me on the one hand, but it also offends me that somebody who doesn't know what the heck they're talking about is trying to tell me something about who I am. Now that's what infuriates me. And I know those West Africans move around, East Africans move around, South Africans move around. There ought to be some kind of admixtures there somewhere. The first Africans that were brought to the United States were from Angola. But yet and still, we don't have anybody from Angola. You didn't hear anybody saying, my DNA connects me with a tribe in Angola. The Louisiana State Penitentiary is called Angola. It is the largest maximum security prison in the state of Louisiana. It was an old plantation. And they called it Angola because most of the enslaved people on that plantation came from Angola. So there has to be more genetic studies. There needs to be a wider database. Black Americans' DNA need to be tested against West Africans, South Africans, East Africans, and North Africans. And I won't take a test until I believe that there is an extensive amount of DNA to test me so that I can fully know who I am. Because just throwing us to Nigeria and Ghana is not enough. I don't trust it, and so therefore, I don't believe in it. And there is nothing wrong with those countries either. I am proud to be a part of any African country. But I know that there are Ghanaians who say that their ancestral home from their great-great-great-great-grandparents was Israel. And some of them say Egypt and Sudan and Kenya. And who made up these DNA tests anyway? See, these questions have to be answered before we can fully trust in this kind of stuff. And I also want to say this. I don't care about any European ancestry that I might have. I want to know how deep my roots go in Africa. I want to know where my ancestry begins in Africa. And to show you how strongly I feel about this, not long ago, I was having a conversation with some white women, and we were talking about doing DNA tests. I volunteered to say that the information that had come down to my family from generations and generations and generations ago was that our family was really of the Tutsi tribe. That my family was down in the Congo visiting when we were captured. This was my father's family. We were captured in the Congo. They were marched through the interior of Africa from the Congo to the west coast. And we were put on slave ship and brought to America. And so I just made up this whole convoluted story about this long trip and all the things that happened to them. Just made up a long convoluted story. And the reason I did that was because I don't want to be put into somebody else's box. I don't want somebody else to tell me who I am. And I feel like what's wrong with telling a lie when you're dealing with liars? And guess what? I could take that same story and place myself in any country in Africa that black people live. Because there is no place in Africa where black people live, where black Africans live, that you cannot find the same phenotype in black Americans. And so that's how come I know all this business about West Africans and East Africans. All of it is a bunch of BS. But see, when other people come in among you and divide you, that's where the problem comes in. So this brings me back around to migration. So I'm just asking this question to Africans, and I hope that you will answer. Do you migrate? That's a simple question. Do you go from east to west, from west to east, from north to south, from south to north? And I'm talking about the original indigenous Africans. And y'all don't like to be called black, but I'm talking about black Africans. Do you migrate? Let me know so I can put this in a video, because I'm sick and tired of these people coming in trying to tell me who I am, where I came from, and what I ought to be, and what I ought to think, and how I ought to feel about myself. I'm sick and tired of it. So I'm going to go by what the Africans say. If you tell me that you don't ever migrate, that you were born in this village and nobody ever left the village and nobody ever came into the village, I'm going to believe what you say. So and this is one of those times when I'm going to listen to what the Africans say, and that way I can tell everybody else to go to the deepest and hottest part of hell and leave me alone. Okay, Africans, you're up. Let me know. Do you migrate? Okay. All right, y'all. Thank you for listening. Let me know what you think about the video. Subscribe to the channel. Give me a thumbs up. Leave a comment. Share the video. And as always, have a great day.